It's 6:35. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. It's very good to have you with us on a Sunday morning. We're all raring to go, aren't we, Ellie?
We certainly are. We're going to take you through the papers now. We're very pleased to say we're joined by journalist and author Ella Whelan and former speechwriter Asa Bennett. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Ella, we're going to start with you, shall we, in the Express. This is Rishi's promise to stop the migrant boats.
Yes, so, I mean, obviously an issue that has been a thorn in the side for the government for a very long time, with reports of increased number of people turning up in the kind of perilous journeys that they get to in small boats. And there has been, you know, if we rewind our internal clocks back and think of the Rwanda controversy, where the government came out with this suggestion of deportation, and it was thwarted quite quickly and easily by lawyers bringing civil rights cases and human rights cases. And so, you know, the Rishi Sunak's idea now, what he's had meetings behind the scenes, it says secretive meetings in government to find out a way, has announced an upcoming illegal migration bill which would cement into law a plan to, it has to be said, quite a stringent plan, to mean that all asylum claims from those who arrive on small boats will be inadmissible, that not only would it remove the right for them to stay in the country and they wouldn't have their case heard, they would be permanently banned. So it's a very, very strong move from Rishi Sunak. I mean, what happens when it gets into the Commons and indeed through the Lords is another matter entirely. This isn't a done deal by any stretch, but it's certainly, at a time when government needs a bit of a boost electorally. I think it's a play to try and look serious on the migration issue.
Because it is an issue that matters to voters, isn't it?
Of course, and the Prime Minister would say it's one of his big priorities. I think the precise phrasing he had was to pass a law to stop the boats, and so certainly he'll aim to do that. Whether it does, actually on the ground change things for good, we'll have to see. But at the same time, we've seen what he can do when he puts his mind to things like renegotiating the terms of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the so-called Windsor Framework. It's basically parts of his 3 Bs that he hopes will help him turn things round: the budget, Brexit, and the boats.
Yeah, OK. What do you make of the Sunday Telegraph, Asa, and the latest lockdown files and this Hancock's plan to frighten the pants off the public is the headline?
Yeah, it's the warts and all look we're getting at exactly how Matt and his team were working behind the scenes in the pandemic. I think really what's striking is he almost seems to be enjoying his role there a bit too much, kind of plotting almost how you can really help get British people to be more scared and cranking up the volume on this, deploying the new messaging of the new variant. It's very particularly interesting, and it's a startling insight into...
Is it really?
Well, there's also the way that, there are other bits lower down in the story that talk about how, 1 minute he's plotting to try and get rid of the head of the NHS, Simon Stevens, and the next minute he's trying to sort of see if he can oust an advisor from the SAGE, health committee that he didn't particularly like because they weren't on side. It's sort of a bit of a power trip writ large.
I think so much of the messages reveal what we already knew about Matt Hancock, which is that he's a complete egomaniac. I mean, to a dangerous level.
Do you think?
Well, so much of what he talks about is obsessed with his targets. I mean, he's boiled down the experience of the pandemic to sort of almost, it looks like his first priority is his career and his record. It's all about his targets, and this, again, I share your sort of almost boredom with it, Stephen, because I think a lot of us knew that this was happening, but it's just the extent to which it's laid bare in such kind of explicit detail is shocking. For example, the way in which, we knew that they didn't trust the public throughout this. They knew that they didn't trust us to take sensible precautions and then also do, the things that were necessary, like be able to sit next to each other at a funeral, things like that. But to see it written out, we need to frighten the pants off the public. I think it's that's insulting, that you realise how sort of how kind of shallow the discussions between politicians were about this particular time. And I don't want to necessarily do the whole thing about remind people that people died, but someone like Matt Hancock, who's only recently tried to redeem himself on reality television, I think now is really having his true character shown.
You see, I disagree with you on that, because, I'm not saying I'm not saying that there aren't questions to be asked about it, right? But it's the way it's being portrayed. And I say, when you look at the detail, like the headline doesn't match the key to this. And I was saying, am I the only person who thinks that? Well, no, I'm not. Eliza in Chelmsford said, it's a storm in a teacup taken out of context. I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking so. Joyce and Jeff in Cyprus say it's normal language they're using to discuss the pandemic. It's most definitely a storm in a teacup. Dennis says, hindsight is a wonderful thing. No one knows the consequences of not locking down. We need to move on. What do you think? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Should we look at the Observer?
Yep. Ella, this is you. MI5 ordered to share key facts over Manchester Arena failings. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yes, well, I mean, in line with a discussion about whether or not you can move on, these public inquiries are being released about the Manchester bombing attack, and the one that was just released this week showed that the MI5 had missed a very significant chance to take action against the bomber Salman Abedi. In fact, he'd actually appeared on the radar of MI5 and counter-terrorism police at least 20 times. So this was definitely an individual that was known to them. It was definitely an individual that they had information on. And actually, the Director General of MI5 even came out and apologised to the families and said, basically we screwed up on this and we're really sorry. But the controversy that the Observer is following is that there is still a reticence within MI5 to share information with the Intelligence and Security Committee, which is within Parliament, who are looking, basically, unless you share the information and are open about what the failings are, and are, of course we understand that why there would be secrecy and an unwillingness to be open in MI5, but this is still a very real, Islamist terrorism is still a very real threat. This isn't something that happened in the past and is never going to happen again, and in order to prevent it in the future, we need to have the information and learn the lessons of why we keep ignoring people like Salman Abedi.
Hey, so what do you make of this? Because, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about this, because obviously a national security issue, a lot of this has been done behind closed doors, but MI5 receive thousands of pieces of intelligence every single day, don't they?
Of course.
How much, was this a failing?
Well, MI5 will be deluged with tip-offs, hints about all sorts of investigations they should launch, and there'll be umpteen plots that they've foiled and thwarted due to their work behind the scenes. And so it's the absolutely regrettable sense that for all the heroic work they do, then those that slip through the net, we then know about it because of the devastating consequences. And so this is why you have to hope they will learn the lessons. They are having to act against their instincts and being very open about this, and hopefully not try and cover things up, but really show they've moved on.
I did hear an expert on the radio the other day, and I can't remember. I can't put it in context. I can't remember who it was, but saying, there is the issue with this is MI5 will be desperate to learn from this. This is. They would not want this to happen. They will be desperate to make sure this does not happen again. We've got to take some comfort from that, haven't we?
No, I don't think anybody thinks that the people who, the experts who work in the security services are cavalier.
No.
But I think what the question I would have is that there is, in the way in which we talk about instances of Islamist terror in sort of on the media or in wider society and politicians as well, is that we're very hesitant to talk about it fully, to be honest about it, to discuss it properly because of the tensions around allegations of Islamophobia. Still, we can't talk about, for example, the massacre of Charlie Hebdo without someone claiming that it's Islamophobic to do so. And so that kind of atmosphere must have some kind of effect on the way in which people follow reports or people follow leads. And I think information about that is definitely worth finding out about.
Yeah.
Hey, so let's look at the Sunday Times, shall we? This is the front page. It's quite a remarkable story, really. Ukrainian parents claiming thousands of children have been abducted.
Yes, this is a really heart-rending account of a mother who was living in Kherson, just near the border for Ukraine and Russia, and it talks about how her daughter, went off for a school trip for a few weeks, and then was reporting about, how it's very odd we're having to be singing the Russian anthem every day, and being exposed to all this, that, and the other about Russia. And then And then the daughter disappeared, off to another camp, and then off to another camp, and then was just completely untraceable and lost to the mother. And so this is a story that's similar from many Ukrainian women, particularly, who are finding that hundreds of thousands of children have disappeared forcibly into Russian territory. People say it's effectively being abducted, brainwashed. It's part of the kind of cultural appropriation. It's the sort of annexation, if you like, of Ukrainian livelihoods.
The terrifying thing about that is we probably don't know half of the story, do we? I mean, there could be thousands of children. What's your reaction to that story, Ella?
Yeah, it's
Horrific.
It's horrific, and actually it links in with a story that I had in the Sunday Times about continuing to cover the war in Ukraine, about how so many of the cities, Bakhmut is, as the Times is reporting, is almost surrounded, almost taken over, and the chaos within a town or a city like that used to have a population of 75,000, now 4,000, and it's not just in instances of war, it's not just people whose lives are lost, but it's also the chaos that it would create in an area where people are still living. So no kind of proper, health services or education services, but also no way of finding out where people are. Things like telephone lines go down, all that kind of stuff. And the Times focuses on the fact that even though actually strategically Russia has already sort of won this area, the symbolic importance of an area like Bakhmut, which said, there was a Ukrainian phrase, Bakhmut stands, and it was all about how this was sort of symbolic of Ukrainians' resilience and their continues to be able to defy Russia, might be under threat. And, all you can say is solidarity with Ukraine.
Yeah, it's just... the more we sort of... It comes a little bit off the news agenda, doesn't it? Because...
You get a weariness.
Because it's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's just ongoing. But it's when you get these little insights and you just think, blimey heck. It's absolutely horrific. Look, back home in the Sunday Express, there's real problems on the high street. 16,000 jobs lost, Asa, in 2 months.
Yes, this is the cost on the high street people are finding of having to handle such sky-high energy bills. And as it stands, the energy bills are going to soar even higher in April due to the withdrawal of the government energy intervention. And so this is all with the drumbeat. It leads up to next week with the budget, and how the pressure will be on Jeremy Hunt to try and extend this support so that many more businesses can keep their doors open. And no doubt, I imagine if you're a betting man, that this is the easiest thing that the government will do, because there is a fiscal headroom now due to their swift action to curb inflation. And so this will be no doubt a potential bunny they could pull out of the hat to show that they get it. They're trying to take action on the cost of living, because certainly you're going to hear from all sorts of businesses, and many more will be shutting down if they don't get this help.
Wholesale gas prices have been coming down now for weeks, for months. It would make sense, wouldn't it, to pass this on to businesses on our high street that are struggling?
Yes, but I also think there's a kind of outside of the immediate effect of the cost of living crisis or energy costs. There's also we've cultivated an anti-high street culture for far too long, and the lockdown, talking about Matt Hancock recently, the lockdown really cemented that, that people wouldn't go out and have a coffee in the local coffee shop or go and do their shopping in the supermarket. So much of it more is done online now for cost reasons. So much people don't go to the pub because it's more expensive than staying in and having a drink. All of that has a knock-on effect. I remember during the lockdown, there was a story of Pret having to let off lots and lots of people, and chains like that having to sack loads of people, and there was a kind of outcry where everyone said, well, why is that happening? That's outrageous. And it was because nobody's going in there, and that will continue to happen unless you actually go out and patronise the shops in your local high street.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to leave it there, but we'll catch you two a little bit later on. Asa and Ella, thank you very much indeed.